What's up, Cops? I'm Lydia from Nashville, and I have Marcus with me.
Hi, what's up, Copts? I'm Marcus. I am based in Canada.
Yeah. And we're going to be giving our hot takes on Coptic news in diaspora.
Yeah, the things that you have been wanting to talk about for longest time and you didn't find a space to talk about. Let's fill the gap. Let's fill the gap with our
Right.
voices.
Yeah, so join us. So, in this episode, we're going to be talking about ourselves, doing an introduction, just in case folks don't know us, and then also maybe giving some recent news splurges. I love this name too. I feel like it's a much needed. Like we're not going to, I don't know, maybe infiltrate too much of the podcast space. Yeah, but we're here.
Yeah, yeah, I think like in our conversations in general in the Coptic communities, we tend to talk about certain topics, certain boxes, and I think we need to I don't know, venture out or maybe have some sort of different angle of
Yeah,
how we talk about issues
yeah,
related to our Coptic communities in diaspora. And sometimes we might touch on the motherland, but mainly focus on diaspora.
yeah. Because we got a lot going on here, and I feel like kind of needs to get digested.
Yeah, I'm a person who have been like thinking almost nothing but about being Copt. And again, I know folks around me. I would need a
Right.
space to rant about it.
Yeah.
And I think, like through the years, we have been finding folks who want to have that space too. Maybe to rent with us to fill the space was talking beyond the norms, beyond the boxes that we grew up having.
You know, actually, I'm very intrigued that you say that it's kind of been an obsession of yours. Do you feel like it's heightened in diaspora, or it kind of started in Egypt? Because actually, the difference between me and you, I was born in the U.S. and you were born in Egypt, so we have very different outlooks, but also very similar. That's the crazy part.
Yes, and I think I think and also maybe something that we would need to encourage folks to think about beyond the binaries of like you're
Yeah.
either a motherland or you're either a diaspora, and those don't mix together, or this idea of like, oh, we need to separate being Coptic from the culture because the culture has a lot of issues and we need to separate. I think time and time again, it's proven that we can't really separate things together. They are interconnected, and we need to enjoy, or at least reconcile, or identify these intersections or interconnected topics. Yes, and why I'm thinking always about it being Copt, I think it has been with me since like I was born. I so for example, I learned how to read through Al Kuraza. The Al Kuraza magazine that has all the news and the topics about Coptic communities, whether in motherland or diaspora, has always been a mainstay in my home. And I also grew up seeing the previous volumes. So imagine have this like history that you have been constantly reading at your household and listening to. I grew up learning or learning nothing or listening to one or no music other than the church music. So I
Yeah.
have been
Yeah.
immersed into the Coptic life in motherland. And when I moved to North America, either the U.S. and then Canada, I couldn't stop doing this.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. I think, yeah, a lot of people also don't see how it's such a very I don't want to say niche identity, but it is like a very odd thing to have grown up with only a particular kind of music and soundscape and calendar and have only a few people know what's going on and the complexity of it. Yeah, yeah, super fascinating. And so, when did you come to the U.S.?
So I moved in 2011 and then to
Okay,
Canada in 2014.
okay,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, so How about you? How about you, Lydia? How, like, introduce yourself? What do
Yeah.
you do? What have you studied? What are your passions?
Yes. Um, yeah, I was born in New Jersey, like a typical one, a side of the typical Coptic community, and then we came to the South when I was very young. So I've most of my life in the South of the United States, which I feel has been a big part of my identity, informing it. Yeah, now through one way or another, because 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I probably wouldn't have thought I would be here. Uh, I'm now running a nonprofit in Nashville, in Mahabba Center, so which is a very big part of my life until we get more staff, which hopefully we do by the end of the year. I'm going to manifest it on this podcast and put it out there. Yeah,
Yay! No,
yeah.
Al-Mahabba, I love Al-Mahabba, and I think
Aw.
it's really nice. I myself too, and also maybe I like I really feel bad that I'm not making the space for Al-Mahabba now, but I
Oh,
think we should be talking about it in
oh,
the like in a separate episode, and maybe delve deeper also on the work that we have been involved in the community. But yeah, I myself too work at a not for profit.
right,
I
right.
haven't founded or anything. It's just one of Canada's oldest community health centers,
Oh,
which now has an initiative for newcomers and immigrants. And I work under that program. I'm really passionate about newcomers and immigrants. I am a trained pharmacist. Maybe sometimes I say I'm a proud ex-pharmacist. I don't work in pharmacy, but I work in healthcare, and in the intersection between the healthcare and social work or community work, which was interesting because growing up in Egypt, I have seen my parents how by instinct you are a community leader and you want to help and you are by default a community worker. This is not a new concept that I have seen just in North America working not for profit, but I have seen my parents doing this. And yeah, I as I mentioned, I lived in Egypt and then moved to the US, lived in different parts there, and then I am now in Canada, Canada's capital.
yeah, yeah. And I think another thing that's actually very similar about it, besides we're both Earth signs, by the way, so this podcast will be very fun for y'all. Type A personalities, but also I think a lot of our childhood, if I can impose on you, Marcus, was built on parents who took history very seriously, um, and especially your parents, but I think my parents as well were very big on collecting and hoarding, and videotaping and recording everything that was happening, especially in Nashville in those early years. And I think that had a huge impact on me in a sense of when you feel like people forget a lot of that memory and what that does to people. And I feel that especially happens in diaspora, and that's why I think is the undergrounding thing or underpinning for me and in doing this podcast is, you know, people shouldn't feel alone in their ideas and shouldn't feel like, oh, if I have a different idea than everybody else, that I should just not engage with the community. And then two, that when that happens, a lot of people forget that there were people who were different and who stood out and who made a ruckus. um, so I feel like that kind of underpins a lot of our work too, because you run Progressive Cops. One of the people who runs Progressive Cops.
Yeah, and it's I think it's also important that Progressive Culture is one of the I think it's not necessarily a one man show or a one person show. It's like a group effort. It's a grassroots thing that just we need to put the things out there and this is how honestly also it was started at the time when George Floyd was murdered, and folks wanted to talk a lot. Who are we in that place, in that space that's called diaspora? Is it really a diaspora? Is it who are we? Are we Egyptians? Are we Copts? Are we Orthodox? Are we many things at the same time? Are we black? Are we African? Are we? And all these things, like, because almost everybody was talking about it. And so yeah, posting, if you go back and you look on the posts, you would find a photo of black Jesus, and black Jesus is saying, I can't breathe. And so without getting into any details, it's just the question of
Yeah.
identity for us as Copts are always complex, and we are not gonna have one answer, and we are not gonna have a conclusion, in my opinion. And that connects back to what you just mentioned, Lydia, about our parents and growing up in the Coptic community and seeing our parents be very active in the communities, and having different ideas
Right.
doesn't mean that we're not Copts, or we can't be Copts.
Yeah, yeah.
Or I think these boxes, I have seen these boxes totally and maybe understood in in the motherland in Egypt, where there's not much there's not much space to really challenge ideas, or to have folks there are either Muslims or Christians. And places that you go and practice socializing and do almost everything, it's either the mosque or the church. Here, and also politically, you don't have much space as well, and other many issues. This has been how Egypt was run, but here, folks, when they move, they want something. They want more space to talk about other topics. They want to live their life differently for many reasons, for themselves or for their kids. Have education that embraces many ideas and stuff like that. But guess what? Repeating that binary thinking of the motherland really makes me or bugs me, and I like to trace why immigrants in general, and this is my passion and my work, get interested in certain narratives. For example, you would see many Copts, for example, would have conservative ideas, or they would vote conservatively. And voting conservatively meaning other folks on the other side, they are all bad, they are all against Christianity, they are all against us, against whatever. And these binary thinking too. And like, I like to track what get them interested in certain topics or certain leanings. One of my passions too is like to track misinformation and hate groups and how they target racialized communities like us. And guess what? For folks who might not have heard that term before, us Scots, we are racialized. We are not white. So.
Actually, this is going to put me on a tangent, but
Yes.
I just remembered I saw on Instagram a couple months ago that there's like this newly registered, but it's like it's been around for a long time, but it's newly registered as a hate group now. And it was like a group that was an English only group that advocated for policy around just not translating anything. And it was very heavy handed in Nashville in 2010 and 2011. And just very interestingly was, extremely right-wing fascist organization. And it's just interesting to me that we're right now fighting for the driver's license to be in Arabic, because it's in Arabic in Alabama, Texas, Florida, Michigan. It's been in Michigan since the 90s, so we are way, way behind. And what's really fascinating to me is that sometimes we can even vote against our own interests because we probably vote in line with those folks. Even though our people want the driver's license to be in Arabic, the majority of our folks do. Anyways, it's just a very interesting line for me that you mentioned that, and I was doing research on this group because they may be popping up soon, but it's held back a lot of our work here in Nashville in a sense of getting anything translated. That there's still kind of that underpinning, which actually comes back to the conversation we were having about the Daily Wire, of people thinking, Nashville and Atlanta are these two progressive cities in the South that you can go to, but are not actually. Yeah, yeah, and having like this very big fascist element and hoping that Coptic people here, being a large community, are not going to participate in that. But yeah, but I think that's why we have spaces like this, so we can have the hard conversations, because we also project a lot of the persecution narrative and the victim narrative, and I think it's important for Coptic people to also see ourselves as the ways we can be harmful and have those conversations as well. So hopefully we can have a lot more of that. That was a whole wild story on this podcast.
We are that's why honestly all these topics, like, really you hit all these wires with me, Lydia, because I think, stay tuned, we're going to talk about these topics, and whether we would have the version of Lydia and myself ranting about it, or maybe talking about it, what we have seen throughout our life, whether on the ground or online, on these topics. But also, we might be inviting our friends, because guess what? There are so many very creative Copts beyond. I know that the professions that we were trained, I am one of them, like I'm a trained pharmacist, and I know what I talk about, but also I think we needed other folks who have been doing the work, studying and researching many topics that relates to us. So we are going to bring these experts, these researchers who are really passionate. They have different ideas as well. But they are still passionate Copts, which brings me to the point of like being like, I think the church space has their own politics and limitations, and I think this is what it should be. But Copts need to have a space to discuss other topics or their own topics with their own hands beyond the church as well. I think we need to have these topics or conversations
100%.
happening.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think when people like, I don't want to say people like us, but when people say that the church has its limitations, I think people find that somewhat, I don't know, they may take offense to that or feel like we're limiting the church in some way. But to me, a healthy society knows where everyone is placed, and has a sense of like, this is the grocery store and this is the church and these are its functions. And yeah, this is also a very interesting topic here, because I feel as though I'm always very Nashville heavy, so I apologize for people who don't understand this context, but hopefully, it interests people. But it's a very fascinating thing here in that people don't want to give up that loyalty, and I think to a degree that happens across diaspora, that there's a sense of, when you're in diaspora, you're losing your culture, you're losing your language, you're losing a part of yourself, your memory, your heritage. So there's more of a sense of clinging to it. At least that's the sense I get, as opposed to when I meet folks in Egypt who, the church is still a very big part of their lives, obviously, and still a very big part of their identity for obvious reasons. Whether that be because of the state putting it on kulbatat, or like that state ID and using it as a way of identifying people. But I feel like there's a different type of clinging here that people, when you're trying to say you need to wean yourself off this institution, it is not healthy what we're doing to ourselves and putting, a priest who has an engineering degree in social services is not doing what you think it's doing, no matter how many days he spent in the monastery. Um, yeah, I think is a very big discussion here, because we haven't transitioned, and maybe not a lot of Coptic communities have transitioned beyond that too. I feel like that gives me a little bit of hope that Nashville's not unique in that kind of, if we let go, what does it mean to be Egyptian? What does it mean to be Coptic? Um, yeah, and it's actually really sad. It's sad because I get like a lot of people are very, the church might be an unhealthy institution. It has all these unhealthy ideas. It ostracizes people. It has too much power. It gatekeeps, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but sometimes I'm a little sympathetic for the people who, even in my generation, who like just can't, they can't let go because they feel like, what else is there to me if I can't, if, I'm not attending hymns class. And if I'm not in church 4 times a week after work, yeah,
Yeah,
it's yeah,
living as a Copt differently can be super hard because we have been conditioned to live in a certain way, and I really know what I'm talking about because I have my family and friends are so either lay people or clergy. I have heavily, like many of my friends and family are clergy member, men and women, and all the levels of clergy people, bishops, metropolitans, priests, and so I'm a person who know what I'm talking about in terms of doing two things that could be oxymorons or contradicting each other. I call myself, for example, a progressive traditionalist. Whoever hear this would feel like, oh, you can't be like this. Or even like I get that on progressive cops or other places. If you are progressive, like I even hate this about left politics where they would, and folks actually would be surprised when they hear that, oh, you call yourself progressive, but you are criticizing the left, of course, and progressiveness, of course, because in many cases they don't really like it turns into a dogmatic space that is oppressive. And I have seen how this and I have lived through that as well, and I don't want to repeat this, especially when I have the space. So I think we need to make spaces for folks who don't want to be Copts or connect to the community anymore. This is one, maybe could be one category, and there are other folks who and those first folks who might have chosen to maybe to assimilate to a different community that's totally or mostly or partially not Copt. Folks who try to really fit into other Orthodox communities that are not Egyptian. Folks who try to force or fit into predominantly white communities, white evangelical communities, etc., because they haven't found space, or they haven't found themselves into a Coptic community for many reasons, and that's okay. Other folks too who try to straddle like many and navigate many communities at the same time, you would find them church going at certain point, and other time they would do many things that might not align with the church politics, and that's totally fine. We hear in conversations online, and we'll be talking about like online bullying, especially in our Coptic communities. You're either Orthodox or none. You're either no. You can't like we can live many things at the same time, and we can celebrate them too. And that doesn't mean that you are not faithful Copt or whatever the church would say. You can't, whatever you want to practice, because also, guess what? Christianity is not one version. And if you think that just Coptic Orthodoxy is the only Christian version, you need to think about this more.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot that goes on the online space too because I feel like we yeah, there's a level of we can't be having these discussions in person or I don't know what, maybe it's the new age. Yeah, I think we need to do a full thing on online stuff. Just chart
Yeah.
all the craziness.
Remember, remember the
Yeah.
accounts that we were able to shut down
Yeah.
when we called them out? Yeah, we will talk about
Yeah.
this. Ah,
Yeah.
when one
There's a
guy,
lot to discuss on terms of the online.
what do you like to do in your spare time when you have spare time? Let's start. Let's end this episode on a fun
Yes.
stuff because we want to also be WhatsApp cops spirit.
Yeah. 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 Fun spirit. Um, I have a lot of plants, so I like taking care of them. I will position them next time where it's nice to show everyone. And I'm also, actually recently I got a little book journal. I didn't know these were a thing, but you buy these little book journals to record all your writings. Not all your writings, the books that you've read. Because since I've left grad school, I have not been reading as much for obvious reasons, but I'm trying to get back into that because I feel like that's a very important neurological function because I have Alzheimer's in my family. See, I can't be like lighthearted. I have to I have to be like full on, you know what? Alzheimer's is going to get me, so I got to do something mentally stimulating. So I got a little
That's
book
beautiful.
journal and I'm going to be like trying to read a little bit. How about you, Marcus?
Nice. No, I'm actually looking at our video now, and I can't not talk about the curls.
Oh,
I
thank
think
you. Yeah, they're
yeah,
shorter now.
and me too.
Yeah.
Also for embracing the curls, and I think this is part of our Egyptianness. Like I love my curls, and I would encourage more folks to try them out. Maybe we
You
would
know
need
what?
to.
A hair care routine. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, we should do one episode, and also maybe we can talk about also hair routine for men too, and like talk
Yeah.
about like um yeah, more I what I like to call it renewed masculinity.
Oh.
Yeah, in our Coptic community. So we need to talk more about
I have
how
a lot
because
to say about that. So.
yes, because also I cannot not think about this as a parent. I
Mm,
have two little kids, and they
yeah.
are boys, and
Yeah.
I cannot not think about this. So yeah, so I love curls. I love
Yeah.
mustaches. I
Yeah.
love to ride my bike whenever the
Oh, that's so nice.
weather is nice.
Yeah.
So these are things that I like to do.
Yeah. How'd you get into biking? You just
This
bought a
is
bike and you were like,
it was part of the desperate immigrant
okay,
who don't know how to drive. So the bike is the
there you
thing that
go.
saved me as an immigrant
Wow.
in the U.S. and
Mm,
then in Canada. And guess what? I think I encourage folks to do it. They will r- rediscover their own cities differently
yeah.
if they ride bikes.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. I, yeah. I love absolutely walking, but yeah, Nashville is
Here you
not
go.
not a
Yeah.
walkable city. But yeah, when I was in Chicago, I loved doing that. I could walk for miles and miles and miles through the city. But you get to know it in a different way. That's something we've lost. But yeah, that's so
Yeah.
sweet. Maybe I need a
If I
bike. That's what I'm hearing.
we should
Try one.
maybe we might need to talk about this in the next in a future episode.
Yeah.
Do we need to talk about what are we looking for in terms of news related to in the next few minutes? What are we
Sure.
thinking in terms of news that is related to Copts in the upcoming or
Well,
that happened in the last few maybe headlines?
yeah. Well, we have a lot of drama in Nashville, but I don't know if we can do like a Nashville segment every 2 weeks. So what is on this? Yeah, I think we could look into. I think the big discussion here is what's the value of a church building without the spirit of the church, because that's a very big thing here in the Southern Diocese. So a lot of people are getting very angry at the money being spent purchasing churches, vacant Protestant churches, and converting them into Coptic Orthodox churches. And a lot of people they were getting banned from groups now for naming people's names, which is now on my bingo sheet, is to get banned from one of the Coptic Facebook groups in Nashville. But we'll see. So that's a hot topic going into the summer, especially. I think a lot of parents are looking for summer programming too, and that's not being provided. But that's always me on the nonprofit. I'm like programming. But what about you, Marcus?
Nice. I think, and I like this spirit, honestly, Lydia. I like that you're mostly focused on the locality, which you're really aware of your capacity, which is I really commend on it, you on it, and I think actually we have different virtues, I guess, in terms of like Christian language here.
Yeah.
But I really like the fact that you focus on. For me, I like to think nationally or globally. And I think what's coming soon is the Global Coptic Day, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, June 1st,
Spicy.
and spicy. Yeah, some folks consider it spicy. Some folks consider it like, oh, it's just the feast of the Holy Family entering Egypt, and some folks, like many folks, would like the idea of a Global Coptic Day, but also other folks would think like, oh, what is it to be a Copt in the Global Coptic Day? What are we celebrating? Is it just a celebration of Coptic Orthodoxy or just the churches? Because also this is also another topic that I always think of, where churches would do the Egyptian or Coptic festivals around September or in different times. Here you go. I see the rolling of the eyes, and I have another rolling of the eyes too, because I wish that like how many of other Egyptians whom we include in the Egyptian festival. So if the Coptic is it the Global Coptic Day, how are we outreaching? I always think about outreaching to
Yep.
other communities. Are we just outreaching to Christian communities? Are we just outreaching to our Oriental Orthodox siblings? Are we outreaching to Eastern Orthodox siblings? Are we just making it Christian? Why don't we just get to the streets and enjoy being Coptic? Being Coptic is music, is celebration, is dogma, is theology, is art. But also, if you celebrate Egyptian festivals, you need to have Egyptian music, not just church music, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I always think about.
That's
So
gonna
I
be a long
encourage.
episode.
Yeah, so maybe we might talk about this in the future. But yeah, I would encourage folks who are celebrating Global Coptic Day to think beyond who are we celebrating. Are we celebrating women? Are we celebrating Coptic survivors? Are we celebrating our queer Coptic folks? Are we celebrating folks who are forgotten and were pushed out of churches and Coptic communities for a reason or another? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said there. Yeah. So a lot of summer topics coming up. A lot of summer topics.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think we have anything to talk about, right?
I mean, we can close off. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll
Okay.
we'll see folks soon with a new episode on something. And feel free to let us know what other topics you want us to cover, or what other news. I was even thinking to make it a super long episode with the Global Coptic Day. I don't know if you remember Coptic Voice. Well, of course you do.
Yes.
Of course. Yeah. But they did an article years and years ago about someone who was like celebrating Global Coptic Day is about celebrating the globalization of Coptic people. And I had written a response because I was like, that's absolutely ridiculous. Coptic people have always been global. Y'all just, I don't know. You're very non-historical, ahistorical people. But yeah, we can also go into the whole, yeah, the colonial idea of Coptic people. All these brown people are tribal and they live in one section and they've never traveled outside of their little villages. And until now, until the 20th century, when white people came and brought them to London and civilized them, which was, yeah, very sad to hear Coptic people say that, but that's a very common narrative, unfortunately, is yeah, nobody knew about our church. Even though, like, we're taught the whole time about the councils and how important Egypt was to the establishment of Christianity. And all of that goes out the wind. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, it's just, we were only civilized when white people came to us. So,
I
yeah.
think one main thing we need to do here, and we would love for you to join us, is like, thank you so much for listening to us rambling this
Yeah.
half an hour or so. And if you are listening to us, I don't know, whatever the device, or you're listening to us in the car or with whatever the way, thank you. But also, yes, like connect with us with whatever we are on Instagram, on YouTube, and we are also have an email. Connect with us, like DM us, send us your thoughts, comment. We
Yes,
will see
please.
them. And yeah, like we want you to have the space to talk about the things that we haven't heard before, and or even maybe talk about the same topics, but in a renewed way, or in a new spirit or something. So just connect with us, and
Send us
I think,
news, send us posts. We will react.
yeah,
Yes.
keep celebrating your Copticity, keep celebrating being diverse Copt, and all the diversity, and all the like all the even like goods and bads, and like all the complexities of being Copts.
Yes.
We want to celebrate this.
I mean a little, yeah, you know?
Yeah.
That's what we do.